Blake just let me know that he bottles his bacon grease. I mean, is that Southern or what?
I bet you most of our listeners do that.
Okay, let me ask. Mississippi Ag John Deere Tractor text line, 601-885-3776. Do you bottle your bacon grease?
We were talking about cooking in the cast iron again.
Yeah.
That's what we do in the break. We talk about things like that.
Yeah.
And,
well, we had to break down steaks.
Yeah, well, I will eat steak as much as I can.
Yes.
Until it stops my heart.
You know Al Michaels only eats steak and potatoes?
Which is a remarkable he's a football guy.
Yeah. He's
Al
78
Michaels.
years old or something.
I feel like he and Don Shula were probably the same person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And John Madden.
Yeah.
Even though, I mean, Al's more refined.
Yeah.
You know.
Because he talks for a living.
Yeah.
But, yeah, Al, steak and potatoes, Al. I love that. But, yeah. Gotta do it. Bacon grease is the way to go, man. Save that stuff up.
Res Dog, hearing Jeff Lebby to South Carolina as offensive coordinator. You know, if Shane Beamer makes that hire, that's an excellent hire.
Why would you do that?
Because he gets total autonomy on the offensive side of the football at South Carolina, whereas he works, even though it's a great gig at Ole Miss, he works with Lane Kiffin, an offensive-minded coach at Ole Miss.
You'd have to know that you're getting that if you leave to go to South Carolina.
Yeah, you would have to know that Shane Beamer is
not
handing you the keys, like Sam Pittman did to Kendall Briles, and saying, you run the offense. That's your deal. And we're going to run your stuff 100%. That would be a good hire. That'd be a good hire. Yeah. I don't know. Is that done? I haven't been on the boards. Blake and I have been running our mouth for an hour and a half.
I haven't seen anything announced or anything like that.
So
I wouldn't imagine Lebby would leave Ole Miss with 2 games left, would he? And a bowl game?
Now that I don't know. As far as timing, I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I mean, Will Hall, head football coach at Southern Miss, I don't know if that was Tulane's last game or not, Blake, but as he told us on Friday, he was coaching that game and then officially taking over Southern Miss 100% on Sunday or Saturday night, whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
But, and by the way, thank you all for listening to that Will Hall interview. You can find it on Facebook, search the Out of Bounds Show and watch it, or you can listen to it on Apple Podcast, search the Out of Bounds Show. We're going to have Steve Robertson here in a couple of minutes. And then Brad Edwards, College Game Day on ESPN Radio. Brad will join us at 9:30 today. Want to welcome you in. WRKS 105.9 The Zone. ESPN. We are the Out of Bounds Show. Thanks for hanging out with us. I hope you had a great weekend, and I hope that you bottled your bacon grease. The Blakey Blakester did.
Everyone on our text line's like, yeah, pretty much, yes.
Okay.
Remember what we talked about that Brad Crawford brought up about a week ago or so before this, when he was talking about why South Carolina shouldn't hire Shane Beamer?
Because of the stats that you gave me from 2000?
Inexperienced head coaches over the last 20 years are under 500 as head coaches, and 10 of the 17 were fired before they finished 5 seasons.
300 and this is the number you gave me, 341 and 371.
Yeah. The only 3 that you could call successful for sure would be Mark Richt, Dan Mullen, and James Franklin. Kirby is still, I guess, in theory, out.
Yeah.
Verdict would be out on him.
Yeah.
But everybody else has been almost pretty much an abject failure. I mean, you can't cut your teeth in the SEC. It does not work.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. Yeah. It's a terrible hire.
Well, I like Shane. He's a nice guy, and I think he knows football. But in every every hire comes with an enormous amount of risk, unless you're hiring Urban Meyer at Southern Cal or something. But, even then, you know that he could implode in year 4, but you think you'll get a natty out of it. Point is, if Shane Beamer is hiring Jeff Lebby, that could be interesting. Ole Miss fans that I've talked to are not convinced that Kiffin stays more than 3 years. And they were already talking that, hey, this Lebby guy looks like he'd be a great guy to kind of groom and be the next dude. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if that is true or doesn't happen. But love the discussion this morning on the coaching carousel and who could end up where. But I do stand by, before we go to our next guest, I do stand by the fact that there's really, to me, only two coaches that kind of fit the NFL mold in the SEC right now for me, and that's Dan Mullen and Lane Kiffin. But we'll see. Out of Bounds, 105.9 The Zone, brought to you by Juniker Jewelry Shop in Madison, Highland Colony. That's the go-to place for engagement rings and wedding rings. That's Juniker Jewelry Shop in Madison, Highland Colony. Want to go to the Abita Pecan guest line. Welcome in Steve Robertson, Hail State Insider, genespage.com, 247 Sports. And we're going to start with recruiting, then we'll go to Mississippi State hosting Auburn. Steve, Pounders from Byhalia, Mississippi decommits. What is the latest on the recruiting front for MSU?
Well, the bottom line is, Mississippi State has, got some commitments they've got to add here in the next few days, and now there's a fifth offensive line spot available. That's kind of the consensus opinion we've had from the beginning of the recruiting cycles. That State targeted 5 offensive linemen. The good situation here is the fact that you find out now rather than on signing day and being part of some orchestrated circus for public relations purposes. You kind of get ahead of that, and you're able to hopefully replace that player with a player of comparable ability. I mean, if you coast this thing into signing day like some staffs have before and just kind of hope for the best, then signing day comes and goes, and then you're left having to go pick through the leftovers. And so in that respect, I think it's the timing of it, I think, is kind of advantageous because of the fact at least you get a chance to kind of recover. But, a lot of good vibes out there, I guess, right now by John Lewis from Germantown. I expect him to announce later this week. I believe Thursday is a target date for him. Florida State, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, all three heavily in the mix there. And that thing has changed almost daily. It's like some days you hear Florida State's the lead, and then you hear Ole Miss is the lead, and then you hear State's kind of charging up from behind. And so I think that's really intriguing. I think he might be the best defensive player in the state of Mississippi. And I think that he's the guy whose recruiting kind of got kick-started late after a really strong senior season. And we've got him rated as a 92, and I think that's fair. And I'm eager to see what some of our national analysts think about him after seeing him in the Mississippi-Alabama All-Star Game practices.
Do those practices start today?
I believe today is check-in day. I'm not going down this year, but yeah, Tuesday, Wednesday's kind of the big days, and then Thursday they kind of have a light walkthrough, and Fridays their community service day, and they play the game on Saturday. But as bad as this year is recruiting-wise from a talent pool standpoint, I think we can go win the game. I mean, I really do. I think we have a really good chance of going to winning the game again, and I'm excited to see what happens.
Interesting. Steve Robertson on the Out of Bounds show. So Steve, the Mississippi State staff knew where this was going with Pounders and Buckhalter, and instead of allowing it to happen on signing day, they just called a spade so that they could move on and actually be in the mix for some other comparable prospects a week and a half plus out of signing day. Is that right?
Yeah, and listen, let's give the staff some credit for making the call there too, but let's also give the young guys maybe some credit for being honest about it. Because there have been some guys that have, quote, decommitted here in recent weeks that it was really, they were encouraged to go find somewhere else to play. I mean, because we've always talked about it's not the kids you sign, or it's not the kids that you don't get that get you beat. It's the kids you sign that can't play. And if you've got guys after fall evaluation you feel like they aren't going to be able to contribute, everybody's better off by having a pardon of the way. Some of that has happened. And then a couple of these things have been based on, a player's indecision. Let's be honest about that. I mean, but if you're not convinced, if you've been a commitment, for 8-9 months, and then now 2 weeks before signing day, you're kind of playing footsies from other schools, well, you kind of get what you deserve in that respect. I mean, I think, you give State credit for being a little bit proactive and not just letting it happen to them on signing day. But, some of that, too, is, they're guys that just like the other guys better. And sometimes it's just better off to go ahead and cut bait now rather than get embarrassed on signing day.
What is left for them here over the next few days?
Yeah, I think they'll take another offensive line. Cannon Boone, Virginia Tech commitments in the mix, and Austin Barber out of Jacksonville's a guy that's in the mix. And watching the Florida schools with him late, because he's a guy that was committed to Minnesota, got some opportunities now at Maryland, Virginia Tech, Ole Miss, Mississippi State. But he's a guy that'll be awfully intriguing down the stretch. You've got to go get probably a couple high school defensive ends, where they get Randy Charlton last week out of Central Florida. It kind of answers the immediate need for next year. But got to get a couple defensive ends, got to get a couple defensive backs. Jadarius Perkins out of Mississippi Gulf Coast is a real name of interest. He recently backed off his commitment to Oregon. State's in the mix there along with Oklahoma and a couple others. He's originally from Hattiesburg, so that's one you look at. And then C.J. Johnson out of French Camp Academy. That's a guy, a lifelong Mississippi State fan, finally got the offer. And, we expect that to happen, sooner rather than later. But you're down to the nitty-gritty. State's basically got 7 spots to fill, and they're recruiting about 16 kids to fill them.
Steve Robertson on the Out of Bounds show. What about M.J. Daniels from George County? That's a Mississippi State A&M Ole Miss race?
Well, it's a Mississippi State race with A&M and Ole Miss trying to get back in it. I mean, everything that we've heard, privately and from MJ himself is that State's kind of holding the line there. Now, of course, Ole Miss and A&M both trying to make it interesting. But, I really don't think Texas A&M is a factor. Some people have kind of made it out to be. But, MJ Daniels' cousin, Dylan Lawrence, is in school at Mississippi State. MJ has been up here probably 10 times this year and spent some time on campus with Dylan. And so you feel pretty good about that. But, man, it's Mississippi recruiting. Saying it's like at this point nothing ever surprises you. Ever. And so, but, yeah, we feel pretty confident about him right now. But if you ask me tomorrow, I may feel differently.
Out of Bounds, 105.9 The Zone, ESPN. Oh, man. We're streaming live on the Out of Bounds radio app. We're visiting with Steve Robertson. So John Lewis is down to Mississippi State and Ole Miss. He's out of Germantown, and you expect him to announce on Thursday?
I do. Well, Florida State's still in the mix here a little bit too, but I really think in the end he will stay in state. But Florida State has tried to make it interesting and give them credit for that. They've done a good job recruiting Mississippi this year, but yeah, I think it's going to happen on Thursday. There's some ebb and flow with that, and I kind of got the sense in talking to a couple people that he's pretty ready. He's almost there. Probably needs a day or two with the family just to kind of sort things out to make sure that they're making the right decision. But I'm told that he has a pretty good idea about where he's going to go. He's just not quite ready to reveal it yet.
And the quarterback, Sawyer Robertson, do you expect him to sign in December?
Yeah, I do. Now, he's not a mid-year enrollment guy because he's also a baseball player, and they've got a chance to win a state championship up there this year, and so he is going to. That's always been the plan, that he was going to enroll in June. So that hadn't changed. He'll sign in December and then finish up high school in the spring and report to Mississippi State in June.
What about defensive line? If for MSU, if they lose Cooper to Ole Miss, where are they as far as D linemen, especially with the opt-outs and transfers that they had going forward?
Yeah, they're still on a handful of guys out there, and I expect them to add 2 high school defensive ends in addition to what they've already got with Trayvon Marshall, and of course they pick up Randy Charlton. But there's probably Jaden Jones is a guy out of Montgomery that is kind of in the mix a little bit. State's been on him a long time. I think he may be behind a couple of guys. Deontay Anderson's a guy that has consistently been, had Mississippi State listed as a favorite. And so those are things you kind of when you get down to the nitty-gritty here, it's all these relationships that have kind of been, hit or miss. It's time to get right or get left, and so that they have some options in the defensive end position, and they're not expected to take a D tackle this year. But they'll get some guys, and I think getting Charlton out there and Marshall gives you a good base, but you need to add a couple more guys to it. And when you look at the fact that Kobe Jones and Marquis Spencer are moving on after this year, and you look at what's returning, Jack Harris has shown some flashes, and Aaron Odom's done some nice things on occasion, but I don't think there's anybody right now that says, hey, these guys are ready to go start. And so I think that's where we're getting Charlton into the mix. is very important for State because you got to be able to generate some pass rush in this league.
What is the latest on Cooper out of Louisville? Ole Miss or MSU?
It's so funny. It's again, of all the recruitments in Mississippi right now, if you want to watch something that's entertaining, like if you're a fan of Mississippi recruiting, watch this thing with Ty Cooper because there is an absolute war going on right now for Ty Cooper. And a lot of people say, well, Stevie's just a 3-star kid. Well, he is the best defensive lineman in the state of Mississippi this year at a position of need for both State and Ole Miss. He's got a lot of people in his ear that are very Mississippi State friendly. He's got a lot of people in his life that are Ole Miss friendly. And so this is as big a tug of war as we've seen in recent years when it's come to recruiting. You know what? What's so funny is I'll get off the phone with one source and they'll say, hey, you know what? I feel really good about State's chances. I hang up the phone. The next phone call I get is, hey, I really think this kid's going Ole Miss. I mean, it's like Ty has probably kept it as close to the vest as anybody I've seen in recent years. And at the end of the day, when this thing bowls out, nobody can be mad at Ty Cooper. Ty Cooper didn't commit to anybody. He didn't decommit from anybody. He didn't play games with recruiting. He has just kind of quietly gone about his business and won a state championship. And now he's going to make his decision. He had talked about committing and signing in February. Now the talk is that his family's ready to get this process over. And so it's a coin flip right now, even with just over a week and 2 days to go. And I don't know that we'll have the decision until National Signing Day. I mean, I think anything before that would be a surprise, but this is one that is going to be all the way down to the morning of National Signing Day.
How many do you expect them to sign in December and how many in February?
Well, I think ideally they'd like to sign everybody in December. And, C.J. Johnson's the guy that's talked about waiting and signing in February. I don't know if he goes through with that. But, they have the ability to sign 26. You've got one initial counter left for 2020 that you can utilize for a mid-year guy like a JUCO guy. And then you've got 25 for the 2021 recruiting cycle. So they're going to sign 26. And I think they'd love to sign all 26 in December. I just don't know how realistic that is.
There's some guys in this top 20 that, what is Jarquez Hunter doing or Canarius Johnson?
Well, both of those are good questions. And both of those guys are on the Mississippi State radar left. If I had to call it right now, Jarquez Hunter is going to be a February signee for Mississippi State. I mean, I think right now Mississippi State is probably the inside track there with him.
Does he project as a running back or does he go to the defensive side of the ball?
He's been recruited as a running back. And if you recall, Amarion Howard from Starkville recently, quote, decommitted from Mississippi State. And I think a lot of that's because they prioritized Hunter. It's a guy that's a little more versatile out of the backfield. He's a tremendous athlete and got a tremendous work ethic. And on the Canarius Johnson, he was committed to Tulane and recently opened up his recruitment. And he could follow Will Hall to Southern Miss. But I know that he's in contact with Mississippi State as well. And, State's got 4 receivers committed. But Malik Neighbors is the guy they're having to fight LSU off. And so it's good recruiting to have some other names out there. So let's say if Malik Neighbors flips to LSU, you got to be able to plug and play. Maybe you go get a Canarius Johnson. Maybe you go get an Antonio Harmon. But you got to make sure you've got 4 receivers no matter where they come from.
Well, which one is better? Which prospect is better? Antonio Harmon out of Kosciuszko or Canarius Johnson out of Laurel?
I've got KJ ranked a little bit ahead of Antonio. Antonio has elite size, but his foot speed's a little bit of a question mark. I mean, he's got good speed, not great speed. Canarius Johnson's an explosive player. Doesn't have the same size as Antonio Harmon, maybe not the same catch radius, but he is a guy that when he catches the ball in space, if you miss a tackle, it's going to be a touchdown. So I like that aspect of him, that he is a game-changing type player in the open field. I think Antonio Harmon kind of reminds a little bit of Jaquarius Spivey, who's kind of coming into his own at Mississippi State. Big-bodied receiver with a great catch radius, not really going to run away from a lot of people, but he can make the contested catch. So it kind of depends on what you're looking for. I could see Harmon kind of being a zone buster type guy, where you curl him underneath and he's got the strength and ability to kind of fall forward, but also, too, you can run some double moves off that and give him an opportunity to make some plays down the field. But if I had to call it right now, just based on pure ability and explosiveness, I would go to KJ. Okay.
Steve Robertson on the Out of Bounds Show, genespage.com. They're updating recruiting nuggets every few hours. As far as Kadarius Callaway Philadelphia? Are Mississippi State or Ole Miss making a run at him, or has Alabama got him locked down?
That's a good question. And so there's been a lot of talk. There was some ebb and flow midseason at Callaway, maybe ready to flip back to Mississippi State. You know, he's committed to State for a long time, committed to Joe Moorhead. And then Alabama offered, and a few weeks later, he was on the commitment list for the Crimson Tide. There has been some talk in recent days that Alabama may not sign him in December and perhaps push him to February. And I think if that happens, I think there is a good chance that maybe Mississippi State gets in there and is able to flip him back. And I think it puts Alabama in a decision-making process because basically if you tell a kid in December, we're going to wait and sign you in February, what you're really saying is we'll sign you unless somebody else better comes along. And
right.
There are a lot of guys out there, they're like, you know what, I'm not going to do it. You know,
right.
I want to go where I wanted. And so I think if I had to call it today, I think he sticks with Alabama. I think they work it out and figure it out. But again, it's Mississippi recruiting. I mean, you never know. You never know what's going to happen between now and tomorrow.
Okay, and then Deion Smith. There's a lot of chatter about LSU or Ole Miss. Do you think it's 50-50?
I would say it's probably still 70-30 LSU, but there's a lot of problems going on in Baton Rouge. I mean, let's like you talked about before, let's call a spade a shovel. You know, there's a lot of things going on down there, and there's a real possibility that whole staff won't be there next year. I mean, we go back and look at the Gene Chizik situation. They win a national championship 2 years later. He's fired. People in LSU and Baton Rouge are not known for their patience. And so they've had this embarrassing year. Alabama goes out and scores 59, and it is a merciful 59, as you know, because they very easily they could have put up 80. The disparity between those two programs has probably never been greater. I mean, the most points Alabama's ever scored in the series, and that's with Nick Saban being nice. So there's a lot of movement down there with LSU, and I really think, for all intents and purposes, Ed Orgeron next year's coaching for his job. And so that's a factor in all this. I know Ole Miss has tried to make it interesting. State was with him for a long time, but I haven't heard a lot lately about State and Deion Smith. And so I think right now, if I had to call it, he probably sticks with LSU. But again, what's going to happen over the course of the next 9 days? I mean, it's like, who gets in his ear, who's influential. Those are the things that are important late in the process because those kids have to find out who can I trust to help me make a decision here. And so it'll be awfully interesting.
Man, I feel like there's still a lot on the table with the top 20 prospects with Mississippi State, Ole Miss, and some other schools. That's
absolutely, and we love the drama.
I'll take it.
We love it.
I'll take it. Steve Robertson, his new book, Alpha Dogs, and genespage.com and the Boneyard Podcast, joining us on the Abita Pecan guest line. Steve, thanks. We'll catch up later in the week on Auburn at Mississippi State. Appreciate it.
We'll do it. See you.
We just didn't have time to do all that. We've got plenty of time Tuesday through Friday to do a little Gus Malzahn, Mike Leach preview as Wardam Eagle leaves the Plains to come to Stark Vegas and Davis Wade Stadium. This is going to be one wild roller coaster ride the next 9 to 10 days going into signing day. The Out of Bounds Show is brought to you by Juniker Jewelry Shop in Madison on Highland Colony for your next engagement wedding ring.